daughter, please do the mastering there and just use Zynaptiq BALANCE and send it to Uncle Philip, and I ran off.
Hey friends, in this video, we're going to talk about a fantastic plugin from Zynaptiq called Balance, and we'll also discuss equalization in general, especially as it applies to the audio mastering process. Let's get started. First, I'll talk about the plugin itself, and then I'll explain how to use it from a practical standpoint and what's relevant for practical work. This is an unmastered track that I downloaded from a free multi-track library. You'll find the link in the description. Here's how it sounds.
Dreams and desires alive and come true.
In order to master this track, we need to understand the main things related to its balance. For example, how open does it sound in the high frequencies? Does it sound full enough? What about the low frequencies? And what exactly is the ideal frequency curve? What does that mean? Let's listen to a couple of well-known songs in a similar style. I'll be making comparisons using the reference plugin so you can see how frequency response of our track differs from the reference tracks. Using the track Shallow as an example, you can see that the overall curve, the overall balance, is already similar to what we have in our track. There are some differences, yes, in the mid-frequencies and the lower mids, but the overall spectral tilt is quite similar. At the same time, when we compare it to this track, Never Too Late, there are some differences. Pay attention to what kind of difference it is. Overall, you can see that our track actually sounds a little bit brighter, and mainly, it lacks low end compared to this reference. Why does this happen? So, what exactly is the ideal curve? Maybe you've heard that one of the benchmarks for an even frequency distribution is pink noise. Pink noise is a 3 dB drop per octave. There are also other types of noise and other types of roll-off. For example, brown noise has a roll-off of -6 dB per octave. It sounds like a deeper, more bass-heavy noise, less open in the high frequencies. There's white noise, which is 0 dB per octave, so it's brighter than pink noise. It so happened that pink noise has become more or less a universal reference for the overall frequency distribution that sounds even to our ears. This doesn't mean that everything needs to be leveled out. You don't have to match everything to pink noise and just leave it like that. Different styles have different sound aesthetics. For example, jazz might have a more closed sound. The sound there has a bit more low end, a warmer tone, and less brightness in the highs. At the same time, there might be some music that, on the contrary, should sound as bright as possible, and it can even be a bit brighter than pink noise. So these are all just relative reference points. There are also other aspects of mastering that are worth taking into account. For example, at low volume, according to the Fletcher-Munson curves, we hear the lows and highs less clearly. If it's expected that the track will be listened to at a low volume, maybe that's just the style of music, or that's how it will be used, then maybe boosting the lows and highs will make it sound fuller at a lower volume. On the other hand, there's another issue. For example, there is consumer audio equipment. Manufacturers often boost the lows and highs to impress buyers, but because of this, the vocals get masked, and the clarity of the instruments is lost. In other words, they just crank up the bass and make the highs really bright. And in this case, an adjustment where the mids are slightly emphasized and the lows and highs are reduced can help adapt the track for better playback on consumer equipment. So, as you can see, there are a lot of factors that can influence decision making here. Let's move on to the practical part and using the Balance plugin. What does it do? It can analyze the frequency response of our audio signal in real time and adapt it to a specific curve. By default, as you can see, the pink noise curve is set here. That's a 3 dB drop per octave. We can adjust it, so we can change this value. For now, let's stick with 3 dB per octave. It will adapt the frequency curve to this noise in real time. Depending on this effect intensity knob, there will be more or less correction. So, I'll just start playback and increase this proportion of correction. Let's listen to what happens to our track.
Dreams and desires alive and come true. In you I see my destiny.
Look at how the sound opened up. The high frequencies became more pronounced. Everything sounds clearer and more balanced. That's because it adapts the signal to pink noise, which sounds more even. And it does this, not by completely flattening everything into a perfect noise profile, but adaptively. The musicality of the sound is preserved. It's just that the frequency balance shifts to a more even version. And here, as mastering engineers, we can make certain decisions. Do we want this exact sound? Or maybe we need to boost the lows and make it more bass heavy? To make these decisions more thoughtfully, we can keep an eye on comparisons with reference tracks, because it's really convenient. brilliant. Look, I'll compare our track now with the track Never Too Late and with the track Shallow. Here, we'll be able to see how our curve looks with this equalizer applied. The balance appears on the graph compared to the references.
Through my eyes, cold my bones, long for warm weather. Fires alive and my time. Don't the years make jokes of my destiny and the meaning is same old time.
The graph looks pretty similar to the reference Never Too Late. It's a little bit brighter, meaning you can see we have a bit more top end. And sometimes in certain moments it seems like there's less low end, so it might sound less warm. Let's take a look at the comparison with the song Shallow. Here too, you can see that our track sounds a bit brighter, and the low frequencies, by the way, are actually quite similar in balance. What can we try to make our sound closer to the reference? Well, first of all, we can use a different target slope. Instead of pink noise, we can use a darker noise, so we set a steeper roll-off per octave. Let's test this hypothesis. Now I changed the slope to 4 dB per octave, so this isn't pink noise anymore, it's a bit closer to brown noise. And indeed, it sounds warmer, not as bright. Stylistically, this might even be exactly what we need. The balance is very similar to the song Never Too Late, so that's just with one knob. We've achieved a result that's already very, very good, but we can take it a bit further. This plugin has options that can help us refine it even more. For example, we have an option called target weighting. Pay attention to what it does. In one case, it applies compensation based on the Fletcher-Munson curves. In another case, if we turn it down, it creates what's called an A weighting curve. As we know, and as I mentioned a bit earlier, if we create a sound where the lows and highs are boosted, what effect does that have? It will give the impression of greater loudness for a track that actually sounds quiet. For music that's supposed to sound energetic and punchy, even at low volumes, this is a plus. We have a pretty calm track, and for us, it would probably be best if the lyrics were as clear as possible. In other words, if the focus was on making the song's words and the vocals easy to understand. In this case, the A weighting curve can help us, because it actually adapts our track better for playback on consumer equipment and, stylistically, it smooths things out. That bright top end and excessive low end, which might not even be necessary in this kind of music. I mean, this isn't an electronic track that needs to sound good in any club. Let's test out these hypotheses. Let's try out this A weighting curve a bit. Well, very well. In my opinion, it sounds really good. This emphasis on the mid-frequencies and the slight roll-off in the lows and highs, it fits this song perfectly. At the same time, there's also an option here to control the bass separately and to adjust the airiness of the sound. So even if you're happy with this curve, but for example, you want to add a bit more air, you can do that. Look, here you have the option to either accentuate or, on the contrary, reduce the highs. And if you move the mouse left or right, you can select the range from which you want to boost or cut. The high frequencies, well, the very top, starting from 11 kHz, would be quite reasonable. If you want, you can slightly boost this area. For example, a slight boost sounds musical and appropriate. As for the bass, it's the same thing, separate control for boosting or cutting the lows. And in the same way, you can control from which frequency this low frequency shelf starts. If we wanted to boost the lows well, sure, we can do that.
Night, through my eyes, hold my bones locked in you, all my dreams and the past.
It sounds pretty good, maybe a bit too much, both by ear and visually. I'm checking as well. Let's compare it to the reference. Let's try a little less, just a slight emphasis on the lows. I'm going to turn this plugin off and on now. Pay attention to how big the difference is.
Night, through my eyes, I see forever and you, all my dreams and desires, alive and come true. In you I see my destiny.
It's just amazing. Now let me explain why there are some other options here. Well, there's no point in explaining low cut and high cut. Those are pretty self-explanatory. When mixing instruments, since you can use this not just in mastering, it often happens that the low frequencies contain some unwanted rumble. For example, in vocal tracks, the lows up to 80 Hz are often filtered out, and here, you have that option as well. Sometimes you need to cut off the highs. For example, when working with bass instruments, bass guitar, or drums, there can be some unpleasant components in the high frequencies, clicks, various noises, even some electrical artifacts that are sometimes useful to filter out. Next, we have options like infinite and hold. This determines how the plugin analyzes the sound. In track mode, it constantly analyzes the sound and adapts accordingly. For example, the chorus is about to end and the verse will start, and its settings will smoothly adapt. By the way, we can see all of this in more detail if we turn on full mode. It uses a bit more CPU resources, but we'll be able to see everything in greater detail.
My destiny and the meaning in my life, you'd understand if you could only see yourself through my eyes.
You might have noticed that the boost in high frequencies became less pronounced, right here in this section. So everything happens adaptively, based on the music. But if your track changes character very often and dramatically, and you don't want the curve to change too much, you can use these two additional options. In infinite mode, the curve will basically remain stable. New changes will be introduced to it as updates, but it won't completely follow constant changes. In other words, it works cumulatively, it adds some changes as the signal changes, but overall, the curve will stay pretty stable. But if you want to completely freeze this equalizer, meaning you're satisfied with the automatic settings it's made, you can simply turn on hold mode, and then it will stop analyzing the signal. We've reached a point where we're happy with how everything sounds. Now it'll adjust to this chorus.
Forever and you, all my dreams and desires, alive and come true. In you I see.
That's it. I pressed the hold button. Now nothing will happen. No changes at all. Even if I play a section here where only a few instruments are playing, it won't change because of that.
In the dark.
See, here only the vocals are playing, and if I hadn't locked in the changes, if I hadn't pressed hold, it would have tried to bring them out. Also before the curve. This pink noise of ours with the reduced highs and lows. The boost in the highs, basically, tailored to the curve we set up here. This won't always sound musical, so it really makes sense to do it on the fullest part of the song. If you set up this curve, it's only logical to lock it in afterwards so it doesn't fluctuate. However, if the content is more or less similar, you can leave it adaptive. That can actually be an advantage. Let me also show you how not only this awaiting curve works, but how the curve works, which, on the contrary, even with a quieter sound, will create a more complete feeling and a feeling of greater volume. Maybe for this style it's not needed, but I want you to know how it works. Now I'll change the target weighting in the other direction.
Through my eyes, I see forever.
This is due to psychoacoustics. It might feel like, when using this curve, something actually starts to sound worse. This can happen because we start to hear the mid-frequencies a bit less clearly, and we need to add some compensation. Just increase the wet gain a little bit.
Night, through my eyes, I see forever and you.
Now let's listen to a comparison of before and after. This is also a really cool curve that makes the track sound fuller, even at low volume.
Night, through my eyes, I see forever and you, all my dreams and desires, alive and come true.
It sounds really impressive, doesn't it? Going back to the question of which curve is actually ideal for mastering, look, it's always a compromise. That means you should listen to the track on different monitoring systems, on home speakers, on small ones, on large speakers, and in the car. And after that, you can make a more balanced decision about which curve is the most universal, where there's no excessive booming anywhere. For example, in the car, something might boom too much in the low end if it's overdone. In the same way, it should sound good on home audio equipment and on a phone. So, this whole process really requires listening in different scenarios. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that, even though there are a lot of nuances in the track mastering process, so many different factors, a plugin like Zynaptiq BALANCE actually lets you step out of this constantly technical process and focus on something truly artistic, something more creative, in other words, to pay more attention to your own feelings. What do I hear in the music? How would I like it to sound warmer, more open, more emotional? Does it sound better on all devices? In other words, you're working on a broader scale, and all those technical adjustments, the fine-tuning of the bands, the plugin does that for you. I think that's amazing. Personally, I really like it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and check out the description for this video. You'll find a link to my services on the Fiverr platform. If you want high-quality mixing or mastering for your track, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to work with your music. This was Roman Styx with you. Bye-bye.